to everyone, and welcome to this Lung Cancer Europe online webinar. So today's session will be on the role of the European Medicines Agency and how patients and patient advocates can get involved in the European drug approval process. So for me, it's a pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Kate Morgan, who is the head of policy and access of Myeloma Patients Europe. So Kate, on behalf of LuCE, I would really like to thank you for sharing with us your valuable time and knowledge, especially because I know your agenda has been quite busy on these days. So thanks very much for being with us today. So for those of you who are joining a LuCE webinar for the first time, this session will split into two parts. First, Kate will present on today's topic and we'll go through some slides, and this will take between 30 to 40 minutes. And then in the second part, you will be able to make your questions. There are basically two ways in which you can ask questions to Kate. If you would like to make your questions using your microphone so everybody can hear you, you just have to press the raise hand icon in the panel of the program you just downloaded to join the webinar. And I will unmute you and pass your question when it is your turn. In case you prefer to do your question by writing, you just have to type it in the Q&A window, and I will read it to Kate at the questions turn. So I wish everybody a very fruitful session, and without further ado, Kate, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Alf. So hi everyone. As Alfonso just said, my name is Kate Morgan, and I am Head of Policy and Access at Myeloma Patients Europe. And at MDE, we're a very similar organisation to LuCE, and we are an umbrella organisation of patient groups across Europe representing patients who have a rare form of bone marrow cancer called myeloma. And part of my role is to work with our members on navigating the access challenges that we face as a cancer patient community, and also to develop strategies for working with regulators and organisations like the European Medicines Agency, and also with national health authorities on generating access to medicines for patients. And we know there are big inequalities across Europe, so it's a very important topic. So what I wanted to talk to everyone about today was the role of the European Medicines Agency. And what I'll do is I'll go through what it is and how it works. I'll describe a process called the Centralized procedure, which is what the European Medicines Agency operates, and the role that it plays in granting marketing authorization. And you might also hear that referred to as licensing for new medicines for patients, mainly relating to cancer. And I wanted to just describe to you how patients are involved in the decision-making processes of the European Medicines Agency. So what is the European Medicines Agency? So it's essentially the regulatory body that's responsible for scientific evaluation and supervision of new medicines that are created by pharmaceutical companies. And so typically a new medicine will go through a large, quite extensive clinical development process, and through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. And so the EMA regulates the safety of these medicines and also assesses whether they are safe and effective for use in humans across the European Union. In more detail, I would say the key roles of the EMA are as follows. So as I touched upon, in what is most relevant for patient advocates, I think, is its role that it plays in the evaluation of marketing authorization for human medicines. So really assessing the safety data and whether it's effective in patients, and also whether it should be made available and prescribed to patients in Europe. Another key role of the EMA is the provision of scientific advice. And you'll hear quite a lot of discussion around scientific advice as patient advocates. And it's essentially the EMA providing guidance to pharmaceutical companies on how they should design their clinical trials to best demonstrate safety and effectiveness of their medicines. And also on things like how to best select patient endpoints, so what should be measured in clinical trials, in how to capture things like quality of life impact on patients. And so the EMA play a large role in that throughout the life cycle of the product. Another role is for reviewing applications of orphan designation in the EU. And by orphan designation, I mean for very rare diseases, such as myeloma, for example, which serve quite small patient populations and are typically quite difficult to produce medicines for. So the European Medicines Agency, they offer a number of incentives for pharmaceutical companies developing drugs for these types of conditions, such as longer patent lives, and also a lot more detailed scientific advice, which is also called protocol assistance. So the EU reviews applications for orphan designation and determines whether the industry product is actually catering for a rare or ultra rare disease. Other things are pediatric investigation plans. So how will the product, if possible, be explored in clinical trials for children, because that's typically an area of unmet need. Another long word which you'll come across is pharmacovigilance. And that essentially relates to safety of new medicines and whether there are any adverse events that take place. And that is monitored both in clinical trials and also when a drug is approved for use and is being used in patients across the European Union. Other things are provision of information for patients and healthcare professionals on medicines and safety aspects. And it also has a comprehensive arbitration and referral process. Importantly for patient advocacy, because we get questions like this all of the time at Myeloma Patients Europe, and it's about what the role of the EMA is and also whether it's responsible for things like pricing of medicines and access to medicines. I think sometimes it's very easy to target advocacy at the wrong body because there are so many different institutions that are responsible for making medicines available. It's very difficult to understand who does what in the system. But the EMA, importantly, it does not have any responsibility for pricing or access to medicines at a national level. So it provides access in the sense that it says that new medicines are safe and effective and that they can be prescribed by doctors in the European Union. However, it does not make a national decision on access to medicines, or there are no funds attached to a decision that it makes. It doesn't control anything relating to advertising medicines and patents, medical devices, any sort of homeopathic medicines, food supplements, cosmetics and tobacco are all things that they have no control over whether people can access them or not. So as I outlined in the introduction, a key term that you'll hear referred to in relation to the European Medicines Agency is called the Centralized Procedure of Marketing Authorization. And essentially, what this means is that all medicines, they must have marketing authorization before they can be put on the market in the European Union. And by put on the market, they need to be deemed safe and effective because we don't want patients to be receiving drugs that have no value to them and might have potentially harmful side effects. So to ensure that these products are safe and effective, pharmaceutical companies have two ways of obtaining marketing authorization. In the centralized procedure is what the European Medicines Agency operates. And another way of getting authorization is through national procedures. So every European country typically has their own regulatory authority for new medicines. So for example, in the United Kingdom, we have a body called the Medicines Healthcare Regulatory Authority. And they are able to approve new medicines on behalf of the UK and also play a big role in the monitoring of safety in regulation of clinical trials nationally. And every other country will have a body that plays a similar role, which can provide access to medicines. And so this is called the decentralized procedure. In another way this works is through mutual recognition. So for example, if there was a decision made on a new medicine in the United Kingdom, for example, it is possible for another regulatory authority in a different country to request to recognise that decision in their country, just to save the duplication of effort, and if they're confident that that medicines agency has made a good decision. So those are the two avenues that you can seek. The marketing authorization for medicines, and the centralised procedure is the only one relevant to the European Medicines Agency. And I think, as well as being only relevant to the EMA, I think it is most relevant to patient advocacy organisations, because particularly in the field of cancer, because all cancer drugs are typically licensed and granted marketing authorization through this process. And you can see here that a list of all of the other conditions that are covered by a centralised procedure, such as HIV and AIDS, diabetes, and increasingly drugs that treat cancer, so novel immunotherapies like CAR-T and bispecific antibodies. These are all regulated and assessed by the European Medicines Agency as well. And there are good benefits of having a centralised procedure in this sense. So it means that medicines are authorised in all European Union countries at exactly the same time. So there's no kind of inequality in terms of having a marketing authorisation decision being made in different countries at different times. It also saves, in my opinion, a lot of duplicated effort, because it saves many different reviews of the same data, and pharmaceutical companies putting in a lot of resource to get their drug reviewed by different bodies. And it's very good for monitoring the safety of new drugs. And so it makes it easier to see that if there are adverse events in one country relating to a specific drug, that they can monitor that drug in a different country as well, just to make sure that everything's aligned at a European level. Information is made available from the EMA in all EU languages at exactly the same time, which has massive benefits for patients and healthcare professionals in understanding the benefits and side effects of new medicines. And it also allows the sharing of expertise. So there are so many smart people involved in the regulation of new medicines, and they're ensuring that they're sharing information across borders in the European Union. So as I mentioned before, once a new medicine has been granted marketing authorization, so again, that means it is safe and effective to use in patients. And it means that this is available in all EU member states to prescribe safely. But again, there is no funding attached to this, so it then goes to national access bodies to make a decision as to whether to make it available in specific countries. Medicines also have one invented name, so we're all aware of lots of drugs that have names that we can't pronounce, and that's something that they'll get granted to them via the European Medicines Agency, and so the patented name. And alongside this approval, you also get something called a summary of product characteristics, which essentially defines the conditions of how healthcare professionals should be using the product. So it outlines safety warnings, indications for patients, and how it should be kept on the shelf by pharmacists. These are very extensive documents, and it might be interesting if you want to see further information about this, to have a look at some of the drugs on the EMA website in lung cancer to see examples of these in what they say. And alongside this, there are packet leaflets, so the drug leaflets that you get when you have a box of drugs. So information for the patient, and also the information that's contained on the packaging, and this is consistent across the European Union. And another benefit to the centralized authorization is that there is a time limit granted, which means that they have to make the decision and evaluation in 210 days. And so that's the amount of time they have from evaluating the new medicine to providing an opinion on how safe and effective it is and whether it should have marketing authorization. So just to go through who is involved in the procedure of marketing authorization. So the applicant is the pharmaceutical company. So as I mentioned before, this is a company that will have been through a number of clinical trials of their new medicine. So it is a company that has data suggesting that their drug should be made available. The EMA Secretariat, so this is quite a large organisation with lots of staff and expertise who coordinate all of the activities of the EMA and facilitates the decision making of something known as the CHMP opinion. So the Committee on Human Medicinal Products, so the CHMP, this is the most important committee for patient advocates in terms of marketing authorization, because these are the scientific representatives who assess all of the data provided by the pharmaceutical company and provide a scientific opinion on whether or not that it constitutes a safe and effective product for use. So you'll hear a lot about the CHMP committee. There are so many acronyms and it's quite easy to get them confused. But this one is a really good one to learn up front to have. So you're aware of the key decision-making body in the EMA responsible for marketing authorization. And then finally, and importantly as well, the European Medicines Agency and the CHMP committee, and actually all of the committees that operate within the European Medicines Agency, they don't actually make the final decision themselves. So they provide scientific opinion and advice on what the outcome of the decisions should be. And this then passes to the European Commission Pharmaceutical Committee, who have the final say on whether or not to convert the CHMP committee opinion into an actual decision, which applies across the European Union. Typically, and in my experience, I think the European Commission, they rarely, if ever, go against what the CHMP committee have said, and because this is very evidence-based and informed, and a lot of work has gone into this. And so it would be very difficult, I think, for the European Commission to suddenly overturn that. So this just goes into a bit more detail as to how the dossier or application from the pharmaceutical company, what happens when it goes into the EMA system. And so, as I said before, the dossier summarises all of the quality, efficacy and safety data. So how well did the drug work? What's the quality of life for patients? And this goes into the CHMP, and they have two rapporteurs to evaluate the dossier. So these are typically two members of the CHMP committee from different countries representing different medicines agencies. And they have a team of experts who help them evaluate the dossier and to see whether what the pharmaceutical company has submitted is something that they think is viable for use in patients. And at various points during the process, and they can go back to the company to ask for further information. And they can also engage different stakeholders in the process to ask them about their opinion on what the industry representatives have submitted. And we'll go on to address how the EMA does that in towards the end of the presentation. After the rapporteurs assess the dossier, they make a recommendation to the CHMP, and in the CHMP committee then all meet in full and they have a discussion about the evidence and their thoughts on this, and they make decisions based on voting, and you need a majority for a medicine to receive positive or negative approval. So here we have, I won't go through this slide in much more detail because I think it's covered in previous slides. This is just an overview of the procedure timeline. So as I said, there are 210 days they have to assess the submissions and to evaluate the industry data that has been submitted. And as I said at various points, so after the first evaluation, they can ask pharmaceutical companies for further information or questions that they have, and they can stop the clock, which means that this just gives industry a bit more time to get their questions answered and to ensure that the application is as clear as possible. After the next CHMP assessment, they will then go on to determine whether a drug should be approved or not. And the opinion can be positive, negative, under exceptional circumstances, or conditional, which I'll go on to address now. So to go through the types of approval the European Medicines Agency have, so standard approval is essentially a decision that the EMA has made on the basis of comprehensive data. So by comprehensive, this means that there is a large phase 3 clinical trial data available, which clearly demonstrates how that drug performs compared to a comparator, and there is comprehensive safety data and also quality of life data if that is available and has been captured by the pharmaceutical company. And with standard decision making, they will say, yes, this should be approved, or no, this should not be approved. But this decision is made with full knowledge of the evidence. I've rarely seen a negative decision, because usually by the time it's got to this stage, companies should have done a very good job of gathering the data and listening to the advice that they've received from the EMA through the scientific advice procedures to demonstrate that their product is a good one. But occasionally you do see drugs that are turned down. The next category is called conditional approval, and this is usually based on a less comprehensive data set. So it's usually earlier phase clinical trial, so phase 1, phase 2, so smaller groups of patients, and the data is looking very positive, but the EMA, because the data is so small, might think, well, we can approve this, but we only until we know, only until we receive the further data from the phase 3 clinical trials, and to really be sure that this is something that should be routinely available and granted standard approval. You see this quite a lot with cancer drugs, especially those for orphan diseases, where it's important for the drug to be made available as soon as possible, and whilst waiting for more data to become available. Usually conditional approval is only valid for 1 year, and it is renewable, and it's usually overturned by further data. So they'll reassess it on the basis of the phase 3 trial, and it will turn either to a positive or negative standard decision, usually positive. And finally, the exceptional circumstances is where there is quite an urgent need to provide a new medicine, and there's it's very difficult to get comprehensive data, and it's just something that pharmaceutical companies must meet a specific set of criteria and that the EMA have in place around rarities and medical ethics, and a comprehensive plan as to why that they need this specific kind of licensing. It's not something you see much with cancer drugs. I think the top two are the most important ones, and that's just a general overview of the different types of decisions that the EMA make. So importantly, the next part of the presentation will just go through how patients are involved in the European Medicines Agency. So to understand how they're involved in the decision making, it's good to just get a picture of the organisation of the European Medicines Agency. It's, as you can see, it's quite a large organisation, and it's recently moved to Amsterdam because it was previously, before Brexit, based in London. And the EMA staff have all been relocated to the Amsterdam office. And basically, the EMA staff, they're responsible for the general overseeing of the work of the EMA and ensuring that all of the scientific committees, lots of the work that's going on in terms of new medicines across the European Union. They have an executive director and management board, and most of the decision making, as I mentioned before, happens within various committees that are operated by the European Medicines Agency. And you can see here the names of all of them. And I mentioned the acronyms, which there are many, so don't worry if you don't remember them all. But the CHMP is the most important one, so the Committee for Human Medicines, and the other committees, so Committee for Orphan Medicines, and the Committee for Pharmacovigilance and the Committee for Advanced Therapies are all committees that you'll probably hear as patient advocates in discussions around the management of cancer drugs and safety in adverse events across Europe. So underpinning all of these committees are national agencies, healthcare professionals, patients, academics, and other learned societies. So their work is always informed by a variety of different expertise operating both at the European and national level. And you can see that the EMA, they involve patients and healthcare professionals in different ways in different committees. So many of the committees, so the Pharmacovigilance Committee, which monitors safety and efficacy of medicines that have already been approved, they have standing patient members. So patients are appointed to be on that committee for a set period of time. The same for the Committee for Advanced Therapies and for the Committee for Orphan Medicinal Products. So the COMP committee is the committee that looks at orphan designation in Europe that I explained at the start of the presentation. For the marketing authorization, however, so for the CHMP committee, they don't have standing patient members. But what usually happens is that patients are invited under specific circumstances, come and speak to the committee and answer questions on a specific medicine. And so that is usually, so throughout the process of the CHMP committee, from reviewing the the medicine to making a decision. If that usually goes smoothly and the industry submission is very clear that a drug is effective and safe for patients, there's usually no need to involve patients in that decision, because the data has clearly demonstrated that there is a benefit to patients and the quality of life of patients is improved. However, sometimes questions come up throughout the process which need the input of patients and need clarification and supplementing by the input of patient groups and patients themselves, and also from healthcare professionals. So it's usually when they just need some more information that will be involved in the decisions. The EMA, they really try to involve patients as well, not just in the marketing authorization process, but at all stages of a drug's life cycle. So when a company is sort of designing their trials and asking for scientific advice from the EMA, they try and involve patients in providing scientific advice in the orphan designation process, and also in the post-marketing procedures, so getting patient input into some of the pharmacovigilance work that it does. So it's not just focused on getting patients involved in licensing new medicines, but they really try across the board to involve them. So this slide might be a little bit repetitive, but patients can get involved in a variety of ways, representing their community. So as I mentioned, with the EMA scientific committees, and representing their organisations. So the EMA have something called their working parties. So there are two of them. So one for healthcare professionals, and importantly for us, one called the Patient and Consumers Working Party. At Myeloma Patients Europe, we're a member of the PCWP, and it's a committee that meets on a regular basis with the EMA to discuss kind of developments of the EMA and how to optimise patient involvement in the EMA, in a variety of different topics relating to patient involvement in their decision making. And so that's something that is very effective at ensuring that the patient voice is heard. You can also represent organisations via EMA consultations. So if there's any changes to the EMA process, they usually send emails to stakeholders for comment, and you can usually access those by signing up via their website. And they occasionally hold workshops, which patient groups can attend. And I'll go through this in a bit more detail, but individual experts are also is a key way of providing patient input into the process. In terms of the individual experts, and I've touched on this briefly, was around scientific advice and protocol assistance. So this is where pharmaceutical companies request scientific advice from the EMA on their development of a medicine when it's going through clinical development in phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. And they can request this advice at any point, really. And I think what they do is they put together a series of questions that they want to get advice from the EMA on how to best design their trials. And so they can demonstrate that it should be granted marketing authorization. And it makes sure that the trials are the most appropriate studies. So patients are involved in studies that are really meaningful, because sometimes it can be unethical to involve patients in trials that aren't designed effectively. And the Scientific Advice Working Party, which is the body that coordinates this within the EMA, and the CHMP as well, these are the two bodies that do the scientific advice, and they provide the feedback. But they usually, as part of this, invite experts, so patient experts, to participate in the procedures. And this happens quite a lot in myeloma. In other cancers, so we'll get a request to involve a patient in the decision or the drug that's being analysed. And they can either attend a face-to-face meeting with the EMA involving the company as well, where they're asked their opinion, or submit written comments on the trial protocol. And they can also share their perspective and experience with the condition with the scientific advice working party and the pharmaceutical company in direct in a committee meeting, which is really an important way of providing that. And they can provide comments on the development of proposals from the company. So if they have set endpoints that they want to gather, if there's specific administration they want to get information from patients on the feasibility of the study, these are all things that patients can provide evidence on. And you can see through this graph that the EMA is really upping its game in terms of the number of patients that are being involved in scientific advice procedures and in providing that type of advice to the pharmaceutical industry very early on in development. And it's also, as well as the EMA getting more involved in the scientific advice procedures, the pharmaceutical companies are really, they're really understanding the benefits of the scientific advice procedures to help them gain market access and marketing authorization within the European Union. So it's really important that they are doing this. And finally, patients are consulted as individual experts through these something called scientific advisory groups or ad hoc expert meetings. And this is usually, as I outlined when I was describing the CHMP committee process, when a drug is being assessed for marketing authorization and there are questions that come up that need the input of patients, they might not be convinced about the quality of life data, or they might need patient help to interpret what the data means on a day-to-day basis, and how valuable it is to patients, what the data is saying. The EMA will usually convene a scientific advisory group. So these can be standing groups or ad hoc committees where they invite a range of experts to meet to discuss a specific drug. This is something, again, that in cancers, it does tend to happen quite a bit, and patients get to go and sit in on the CHMP committee meeting and to answer their questions on a face-to-face basis. So in 2018, for example, 32 consultations took place, and 25 of these involved patients and carers. So it does happen quite frequently in the evaluation process. I've talked through most of this slide, but so just to clarify the topics that they might go into, if you're asked to participate in such a committee meeting on behalf of the patient community or to provide the patient voice, usually be asked about the benefits and risks of treatment, and usually it provides a patient perspective on the data in front of them, because sometimes it's quite difficult to see that when you've got a lot of data in front of you and you're not really sure what it means on a day-to-day basis. And it's really helpful for them to get patient groups and patients in the room to be able to ask them those questions. So that basically concludes the overview of how the EMA works in terms of approving new medicines for marketing authorization and how patients are involved. Before just quickly finishing, I just wanted to go through how you might get involved in the EMA procedures. And I think it's really important to say that patients should be involved, and it's extremely important for them to be part of the decision making of new medicines at a European level. I think patients have a very unique perspective. They have experience of clinical trials and how drugs operate and work in the real world setting. So it's really important that these perspectives are captured in the decision making. In general, I think pharmaceutical companies, they need to do a really good job of involving patients throughout their clinical development protocol and process to make sure that from phase 1 through to marketing authorization, they are continually gathering quality of life data and patient preference data to ensure that by the time they get to the EMA, they have a lot of patient information to support their drug being approved. I think once a drug has gone to the EMA process, they would usually provide outreach via European umbrella organisations like LuCE if they need to convene a scientific advisory group meeting or want to involve specific patients from a specific cancer community. So it's important to keep your links with LuCE and to understand the work that they're involved in at a European level on this topic. And they also have a list of eligible organisations, which are usually members of the Patient and Consumers Working Party, and include organisations, so MPE, and we're a member, and I think so there's the European Patients Forum, Eurodis, and the ECPC are also members, and a wide range of other umbrellas who are go-to patient organisations to involve patients. So you keep informed in these groups as well, and they can if you wanted to get involved in such a decision-making process, they might be able to inform you of opportunities to do so. Another way of further understanding the role of the EMA and how you might get involved, they have a super helpful and friendly patient involvement team who are always happy to answer questions and to provide advice. So if there's anyone that wanted to get in contact with them, then we could make that link for you. And I know Alfonso is in contact with them already and would be able to do that. And importantly, you can seek advice from across the advocacy community as well. So feel free to reach out to Myeloma Patients Europe or to any of the other umbrella groups if you want further information about getting involved in contacts in this respect. So that concludes my presentation. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was quite a lot of information to take in, so feel free to ask anything that you have on your mind that you'd like clarification on or answering.
So thank you very much, Kate. I think it's been a very comprehensive and very clear presentation. I think our audience has enjoyed that as well as I do. So I have a few questions just to remind for all of you who are attending the webinar that you have two possibilities to send your questions. If you would like to make your question live, just press the raise hand icon. So I will unmute your microphone and you will be able to speak directly to Kate. If you prefer to do it by writing, just type your question in the Q&A window and I will read it to Kate. So the first question I have, Kate, is where can I find some information, the requirements to participate in the EMA activities as an individual patient expert? I thought you mentioned that you will probably share you could share a link that I can pass to the attendees, but just in case you would like to add anything on the top of that, yeah, it's about right. Yep.
Yeah, so I can send you the link giving you an example of, I think it was the summary of product characteristics on a new medicine. So I'll have a look at if there are any good examples in lung cancer that I can circulate, so you can have a read of those. And a good resource for patient advocates and patients to look at is just to have a go through the EMA website. So they clearly state on their website how they involve patients and what their remit and roles and responsibilities are. So if you wanted to have a bit more of a look around that, then I think that's really helpful to do. Further courses you can do to find out more information around things like the EMA and on access the new party course and the WeCan masterclass. They typically focus on topics such as this if you wanted to explore these issues further. And there's lots of resources out there on how to get involved. And finally, the EMA, I was speaking to their patient involvement team recently, and I think they've done a number of videos explaining the role of patients experts in the decision-making process. So I'll see if I can dig those out and circulate them for you as well, so you have some more resources to read through and watch.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kate. And also to let you all know that the content of this webinar has been recorded. So when it is uploaded to YouTube, and if you are watching this now on YouTube, you can find, I will put all these links in the description of the video, so you will be able to find them more easily. So I have another question here, and this may be a very general one, but so it is, what do you think it is important for patient advocates to know about EMA, about the European Medicines Agency?
So I think, importantly, the marketing authorization process is important to know, and where it fits into the clinical development and access process, and just to make sure that as patient advocates we get our advocacy right. So if there is a problem accessing a new medicine, we know exactly who to target and work with to address these problems, and rather than blaming the European Medicines Agency for drug pricing and things, which sometimes happens, and it's very it's difficult for them to do anything about that because it's not within their remit. So I think we really need to just get our facts straight and understand who does what in terms of accessing medicines. I think understanding the key time points where patients involved is important too. So patients aren't involved in every single marketing authorization decision, but they are involved in certain circumstances. So getting to grips with when they are involved in making sure that you're linked in with the relevant people to be asked to participate in these decisions if you wanted to do so. And also, I think if you do end up participating in a decision on marketing authorization, and it's really helpful to speak to other advocates that have been part of the EMA process, and also to the EMA themselves, to understand what types of information do they find useful and what types of questions will they be asked, and to make sure that when you do go to a committee meeting, or if you are participating in any of their work, you are equipped to answer those questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. So there is another question, and it is from your experience, do you think patient input is being taken really into account in the different committees where patients and patient advocates are involved, or is there still some way to go?
In my opinion, I think the patient voice is taken into account in their decision making. I think there's only so far that they can assess the patient input if pharmaceutical companies haven't collected good quality of life data, because that's a key way of them determining the impact that that's going to have on patients. And if companies haven't collected that, it makes it very difficult for them to assess the impact that it's going to have on patient quality of life. But I think when they do involve patients in their decision-making processes, and they are very willing to listen to patients and to take that into account in helping them interpret the information that's in front of them. I think it's very difficult if the data demonstrates that the drug just isn't effective enough and patients are attending. It's very difficult for them to. They're unlikely to change their mind based on the opinion of one patient. So what's really important is for patient advocates to continually gather data and information from the people that we work with, in patients and carers, to get their thoughts and inputs into what they value from treatments and what endpoints and outcomes they value. So if we are asked to present at the EMA committees, then we're not just representing one patient, but we have data from a wide range of different patients that are not able to provide that voice effectively. And I think that's something that's important for the advocacy community to really get advice to provide that type of data. I know the EMA as well, they're exploring different ways of better understanding patient preferences. So what do patients value in general in terms of benefit and risks of new medicines, and how can they take that into account? So they are exploring different ways of making more informed decisions based on patient preferences and values in relation to new medicines. But this is a discussion that's ongoing, and it isn't an exact science, but it's really good that they're working on that.
Great, thanks, Kate. There are still a couple more questions I have. You're still on time to send your more questions if you want to. So the next one is probably something that you have gone through through your presentation, but probably you can summarize. So it's, how do patient groups get involved in EMA marketing authorization?
So I think I covered this mostly, but I'll just repeat that. I think it's really important to be connected to LuCE. So I imagine that you will be contacted by the EMA if there were if there was a lung cancer drug that needed patient input. In other umbrella organisations who are involved in the EMA, they are kind of the networks that the EMA typically go out through to find patients who are participating in. So yeah, keep involved in umbrella organisations, and also I think direct contact with the patient involvement team is usually helpful, just so you can say to them that you're interested in. And I think they do have a database of patients that they go out and that they involve, but typically they do go out through the umbrella organisations.
Yeah, and I'd also to adapt to what you just said, just to let you know, especially because most of the attendees today to the webinar, you are LuCE members. LuCE has just applied to become an eligible organization by the EMA, and one of our goals this year is to become a member of the PCWP, which, as Kate explained during the webinar, it's having ongoing consultations with all the members. It allows to have a very direct conversation with the EMA. So just in case you would like to get involved or get more informed, don't hesitate to contact me or anyone from the board, and we'll keep you updated of all the progress that are being done in relationship with the agency. And so just the last question, and we are good on time. We'll probably be able to finish on time. So the last question, Kate, is, do European countries which are not EU members like Switzerland or UK, once Brexit is completed, take the EMA decision into consideration, or do they just follow their own path?
So all of those countries you mentioned are part of the EMA. So Norway, Iceland, I think it's Liechtenstein, Switzerland, all of these countries that aren't actually part of the European, officially part of the European Union, but they adhere and participate in EMA discussions. So they do follow the opinion of the EMA on cancer medicines. I think for the UK, at present, because we're in a transition period following Brexit, we still follow the decision making of the EMA. But one thing that we aren't allowed to do is to provide patients to participate in the decisions, because we're not, it's almost like, I think we have observer status, so we can observe the decisions and we follow them, but we don't participate in the discussions. And so that's something, I'm not sure whether that will change at the end of the transition period, but it currently is covered by the EMA.
Great. So, Kate, so everyone, that was the last question. So it seems that we have made it on time. And before we finish, I would really like to thank you again, Kate, for making such a good and comprehensive presentation. It has been a real honor for me to, you know, as former colleagues and good friends, to have you here partnering and giving us this great presentation. And I'm pretty sure that the people who attended the session today has really found that quite interesting as well. So thank you very much. And and for all the people who you just attended this webinar, just to remind you that the content will be uploaded shortly to the Lung Cancer Europe YouTube channel. And I also take the chance to strongly recommend you to stay connected to the LuCE social media channels like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, as well as to check our member section in the website to contact your local patient group in case you haven't done it yet. So once again, Kate, thank you very much for your time today, and for all of you, thank you very much for attending and trusting Lung Cancer Europe. I really wish you all a very good evening. So goodbye, everyone, and thank you so much.